Actually, we are mentioning now infrastructure and how we do things, and actually for a traditional company, it's a little bit like looking from the outside at some sort of future world out there. What is the infrastructure of the core tech companies, and maybe even contrasting Spotify's infra and King's? So really let us be a little bit concrete now, because if you go to a place like Vattenfall and Scania, which has a huge infrastructure, which is a legacy, all technical debt in one way, and we are trying to figure out how to deal with SLAs of 2,000 systems, right? That now should fit into a platform. So we are all challenged and struggling to understand what is this infra. So could you tell us a little bit about what we are talking about concretely here?
I think probably Anders can talk a lot about Hadoop back in Spotify.
May I please?
No, but let's start with King, I think. What's the fundamental stack
I
in
think,
King?
so both King and Spotify are using Google Cloud as infrastructure. Spotify moved probably much earlier, not much earlier, but like a couple of years earlier than Spotify, than King.
That's the cloud infrastructure.
That's the cloud infrastructure.
So what do you actually use there and compared to all the open source and everything else?
I think but that's also part of cloud infrastructure, right? So like,
if you do it, it's good.
We use BigQuery, but also I'm just trying. Like for instance, we use quite intensively also Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. I guess it's the same at the Spotify now.
And now you can use Kubernetes in different ways. You can do it more natively, or you can do it completely open source, or even more packages.
But then I think programming language, I think both companies have freedom for data scientists to use Python and R, but I think people use mostly Python.
So Julia is not really kosher yet. We have had some Julia fans on the show.
Yeah, I know, but I think at least to the best of my knowledge, at least until 2 years ago that I was in a Spotify, it was not.
But Python is the dominant language.
It's different in a research team and a product team, of course.
Exactly.
You need to have much stricter requirements, of course, if something is important.
Exactly. Like the moment that you want other people be able to read your code and maintain your code, and then have unit tests that you can test things, you get to. I would use Python. I don't even use R there. If I want to do fast hack, maybe yes, for statistics, R is really good. But again, I'm not expert in R, so I have a biased view here.
So you're
Same
Python.
for Julie.
You live in Python?
Yeah, or
TensorFlow. TensorFlow?
Yeah, Python. Python probably more than TensorFlow, because you do more data analysis than spending the proportion of time that you spend.
So if we needed to define you by the programming language, who are you? You're a Python girl.
Probably I should say TensorFlow.
You should say that.
Yeah, I would. Well, you asked me what's my day today, and I said meeting. But would I define myself as a meeting person? No, I would define myself as a research person. Perfect. So it's the same goes with Python and TensorFlow. So if I think about
very good answer. Yeah.
So speaking about TensorFlow and just digging a bit deeper into that, what do you think about the 2.0 release? And if you compare it to PyTorch, is it and the eager execution and everything?
So PyTorch, I've coded only maybe a couple of times there. So I'm as zero level of expertise and opinion. The same goes for TensorFlow 2.0. But I think what I can compare is Keras and TensorFlow 2.0 because I think they kind of look the same. I think we had our libraries, for instance, in TensorFlow 1.x. We just moved them to TensorFlow 2.0, and we have been testing recently of what differences we see. Of course, we had to spend some time on like, doing the adaptation, but also meant a lot of like performance things are fixed. Like code optimization, distributed work is much easier, and like it's also more readable, I would say, and easier for testing. So, yeah,
moving in the right direction at least.
I would say so. But again, like if I want to say myself being hands-on, I haven't been as much on TensorFlow 2.0. So it's a lot of like, pairing up and like reviewing or like second-hand information from my team. Yeah.
And what is the biggest frustration in the tech stack or where we are right now? Where is it like, can't they figure out how to do? What is it that sort of you think is what they really should aim for to do better? Where is the tech going? Where's this going? What do we need to do better?
I think, okay, so you can look at it from different perspectives. One is like open source, right? And like contributing to open source things. So that's one side of thing to look at that I would like to see tech going towards. Day-to-day work, what is more, I think it's just there's so many of them. And then like you get to a point that you need to decide, and then like, this all of a sudden is changing, and then you need to adapt to another new package, or your team is deciding on something and while another team is deciding something else, and how do you do like the common language, I would say.
And how do you steer that in King? Do you care, or do you try to have a standard or bodies do you have like guilds and chapters and stuff like that to try to figure this out together?
So I think guilds and chapters are much stronger at Spotify, because the organizational aspect is very different. So at Spotify, you have horizontal and vertical, in a sense that you have in each organization, or like a mission or a tribe, you have engineering, you have product, you have designers, you have iOS developers.
To solve the tribe should solve their purpose.
Exactly. So this cross-functional thing moves all the way from like the top to the bottom. Everywhere you see cross-functional, until like the smaller team are also cross-functional, right? At King, you have a lot of games, right? And each game is like its own company.
It's a company within the company. It's a P&L within the company.
Yes. So, and that company has these cross-functional teams. But then you also have this tech organization that is supporting all of these things.
Cross-infra, for instance.
And the shared tech org is basically picking up the pieces that is common between like SDKs that are common between all of different games, and is maintained by them. Or like, we have some platforms, like unified platforms that like all of the tools that are provided are within that. But I would say I have like not enough knowledge to go through the details of those, but and the reason is like the nature of my team and my work, which is we have a lot of flexibility while we build tools and like, test our ideas, and then we need to figure out how to map this to a product.
Yeah, and so this is fascinating, and especially if you're not working in some of these companies, it is a different world, and it's very, very nice to peek a little bit how it looks.
So the time is really flying away here, and we've spoken quite a lot about King now and about you, and we have a number of other topics that you have worked with that I'd love to cover as well. But just a final point, because I think what you're doing right now in trying to accelerate research or innovative thinking in King, how would you recommend a company that feels a bit, they're just focusing on the coming 2-3 months and doesn't really have the innovative thinking in a proper way? What's the best way for a company to get started having this type of thinking?
Depends on the size of the company that we are talking about.
So a couple of 100 people, perhaps?
the C-level and the VPs are on board, committed to take this, because you hit the wall of sponsorship, you hit the wall of time investment. So like after 3 months, if your team doesn't deliver, like will you still keep the team? Do you see the value or not? So I would say like some trainings for
and if,
that level.
If a C-level
needs to be.
If a C-level people come and speak to you, why? How would you describe to that C-level person why research is important?
So I think, again, I look at like which function of C-level we are talking about. Like talking to a CTO would be very different to talking to a CPO, right? So you make some assumptions on the background. I think it's a matter of if you, like, for instance, if you are, when I started learning how to drive, my dad was telling me that, like, if you are driving and you just look at like 2 meters front of you, there's a high chance of having an accident. While like the key to success is to look far. So if you want to keep yourself between the lanes, just look far. And that's, I think, the message. Right?
Good analogy.
Good message.
So
if you want to go in the right direction, you actually need to look further to keep the car in the lane. That's a really good analogy.
And I mean, the other thing is that I think it's a matter of like a bit demystifying AI, because a lot of C-levels might come and VPs come and say that, hey, I've heard this cool thing. Why don't we have that in our product? It's like, okay, hold on a minute. So let's have a chat. So helping them to demystify what AI can do and what AI cannot do is another thing that I would spend time on.